3 years into marriage, the little mistress Ethan kept showed up at my door. She shouted at me, her voice sharp with contempt. What makes you think you can cling to Ethan, you washed-up hag? I lifted my eyes calmly. Because I was with him through his darkest years. The girl tilted her chin high, her gaze dripping with disdain. So you just met him a few years earlier. How is that even something to brag about? Ethan appeared just as we faced off. He walked slowly toward me, tucking a strand of wind-tousled hair behind my ear with infinitely gentle fingers. Layla, what are you doing here? I held up my phone. Didn't you text me to come? Ethan's brows furrowed slightly. Behind him, the girl grew anxious, clutching his arm. Ethan, I'm so sorry, I sent that message from your phone. I can't go on living like this anymore. She spun around, glaring at me fiercely. If you hadn't hogged the title of Mrs. Carter all this time, Ethan and I would have already, get out. The girl's words were cut off mid-sentence by Ethan's cold voice. What? She froze, tears pooling in her eyes. Mia, I said get out. Ethan's tone was flat, his gaze on her as cold and emotionless as ice. Why? She bit her lip, her face draining of color. She must have been confused. How could the man who'd been so tender with her in bed just last night suddenly turn so cruel? Compared to my wife, you're not even worth the dirt on her shoes. Ethan let out a low chuckle, his words slow and deliberate. I knew then, Ethan would never have anything to do with this girl again. She was too naive, mistaking a wealthy man's game for love, foolish enough to come flaunting herself in front of me. I first met Ethan when we were both 8 years old, long before he became the long-lost younger son of the Carter family. We'd both been abducted by human traffickers and sold to a wealthy household, where we endured years of hardship until the police rescued us and sent us to an orphanage. Life there wasn't easy. We often went hungry, faced bullying, and were wrongfully accused, but it was a paradise compared to what we'd been through. Too old for adoption, Ethan and I supported each other through thick and thin, eventually making our way into the real world. We endured the heartache of being scammed out of our savings, the embarrassment of sharing a single bowl of noodles while strangers stared at us like we were trash. That winter in Riverside City was the coldest on record. Our rental apartment had no heating. I leaned on Ethan's shoulder, staring out the window at the snow-covered streets. I asked him, Ethan, what's your dream? He took my hand, his voice deep and firm, to make tons of money, and marry Layla Bennett in style. And he did. He gave me a one-of-a-kind ring and a wedding dress encrusted with diamonds. At our wedding, 10 miles of flower fields bloomed, and 520 drones formed shooting stars spelling my name across the sky. The entertainment headlines that day were all about the Carter family's $100 million wedding feast. Everyone around me envied me. They said it was a miracle, that a prominent family like the Carters would let Ethan marry someone with no background, no connections. But I knew the price Ethan had paid. Scars from family punishment still lingered on his back, with distant relatives eyeing his position greedily. Ethan worked himself to the bone, pulling all-nighters, flying between countries, once collapsing and vomiting blood from exhaustion. Watching his growingly haggard figure, my heart ached fiercely, but there was nothing I could do. I softened my edges, learning to be the perfect Mrs. Carter. At a gala filled with elites, the wives chatted casually about their husbands' affairs, as if love were a joke. Seeing me fall silent, Mrs. Harrison took my hand. Layla, you'll have to get used to it. The bigger Ethan's business grows, the more he'll seek comfort in other women's arms. I froze, then shook my head firmly. Ethan would never do that. Mrs. Harrison smiled faintly, neither agreeing nor disagreeing. When people stand at the top of power, they face endless temptations. Her gaze seemed to look right through me, as if seeing someone else entirely. For I'd never believed Ethan could betray me. So when I peeked through the door crack and saw him letting a woman kiss him while another undid his shirt buttons, I thought I was dreaming. I'd never seen Ethan like that, lazy, slouched in his chair, smoking casually, the smoke blurring his features. A bone-deep cold spread from my limbs to my heart, leaving me paralyzed. It wasn't until a guest at the party noticed me and jumped up, flustered, shouting Mrs. Carter, that I finally snapped back to reality. I couldn't remember Ethan's expression, only that he pushed the women away, chased after me frantically, and pulled me tightly into his arms. He whispered over and over in my ear, Layla, don't cry. I love you, only you. He promised it would never happen again. I wondered if he was comforting me, or himself. They say when something hurts too much, people first try to run away, but does running away make it disappear? That night, as I watched Ethan sleep, tears streamed silently down my face. My heart felt like it was being torn to shreds. Once doubt takes root, it grows relentlessly. In those days, I turned into a paranoid wreck. Every business trip, every party, every phone vibration, every call he answered, all became reasons for my anxiety. Finally, on a night Ethan came home late, our war erupted. I smelled gardenia perfume on his coat. I confronted him, screaming at the top of my lungs, smashing every valuable vase in the house, even our wedding photo hanging in the living room. Layla, no one in this circle can stay clean. Ethan rubbed his temples wearily, looking at me with a complicated expression. I'm sorry, but you're the only one I truly love. He left, telling me to calm down. I collapsed to my knees, sobbing into my hands. Shards of glass cut my palms, mixing blood with tears. I'd thought about divorce, but I couldn't let go. I wasn't ready to admit defeat. I'd tried to fight the world's desires with my meager love. But as you can guess, I lost. The suppressed pain drove me into depression. I trapped myself in memories of the past, in the oaths Ethan had once sworn. Mrs. Harrison was the first to notice. She sighed, squeezing my hand tightly. Layla, you're walking down the same path I did. I stared at the floor, my heart sinking to the bottom. I wondered if Ethan felt any guilt, his wife at home, suicidal from depression, while he indulged in pleasure with other women. Mia wouldn't be the last mistress Ethan kept. A few days later, I heard at a party that Ethan had taken in a pair of sisters, one gentle, the other fiery. Rumor had it they were quite adventurous in bed. No wonder Ethan came home looking so satisfied lately. He was back early tonight, smelling of shower gel, freshly bathed after his tryst, no doubt. Aunt Lucy said you've been painting for 3 hours. Are you tired? Ethan hugged me from behind, burying his face in my shoulder. I set down my brush, pulled away, and started putting away my art supplies. Not tired. Painting had become my refuge during my depression. It was the only time I could forget the suffocating truth about Ethan and his affairs. Layla, this painting is beautiful. Ethan's gentle voice came from behind. I smiled involuntarily. It needed to be beautiful. It was a gift, after all. Oh, Mom asked if we're going home for the holidays. She said she couldn't reach you. Ethan wiped the paint off my hands with a wet wipe, his touch as gentle as if handling fine china. I'm not going back. My answer was firm as I pulled my hand away. The mom Ethan spoke of was my birth mother. All these years, Ethan had used his connections to find my family. He finally succeeded 2 years ago. My birth father was already dead, my mother had remarried and had an daughter, my half-sister, Chloe, who was graduating from college soon. The real reason she wanted me home for the holidays? She wanted me to get Chloe a job at Ethan's company. She'd told me she felt guilty about abandoning me, so she'd poured all her love into Chloe. But now that I was back, now that we'd reunited, shouldn't she show me some love too? Instead, she barely contacted me. I was the one texting her, reminding her to stay safe in the rain, bundle up in the snow, sending her gifts on holidays. I'd told her I was allergic to celery, yet she still served it to me. I saw no love in her, only greed. Did you fight with her? Ethan ruffled my hair, his voice amused. I'm tired of clinging to a family that doesn't want me. From now on, she's no longer my mother. I looked Ethan straight in the eyes. My words seemed to take him by surprise. He pursed his lips, then met my gaze. Layla, you've changed a lot. I smiled. Have I? Yes, he blinked at me like a child, his tone tinged with grievance. You used to ask me when I'd be home for dinner every night. You haven't done that in ages. You don't pick out my ties in the morning anymore either. But Ethan, people don't change overnight. When I asked when you'd be home, you lied about working late. While you were with other women, the ties I picked out for you would be roughly torn off in bed by someone else. Every little thing reminded me of your betrayal, reminded me how sick you made me feel. 6 on New Year's Eve morning, I was putting up spring couplets outside my studio when Ethan called, saying he'd be home early to celebrate with me. I said okay and hung up. I stood on tiptoes, trying to reach the top of the doorframe. Before I could grab a stool, a pair of slender white hands steadied the red paper. I turned around, and looked up into the smiling face of a young man. He was wearing a white sweatshirt, his hazel eyes crinkling with warmth, as if filled with stars. Miss Bennett, not inviting me to help? That's not very nice of you. I'd met Noah at an art exhibition. Funny enough, Ethan had always skipped meetings to accompany me to exhibitions, except that one time. I'd been staring at an oil painting of sunflowers, their brushstrokes familiar. They reminded me of a seascape I'd bought at a charity event a year earlier, for $30 million. The other wives had thought I was crazy, spending so much on an unknown artist's work. I wasn't one to waste money, but I'd seen myself in that painting, hesitant, painful, struggling. The sunflowers in front of me were bright and passionate, like dancing notes. If both paintings were by the same artist, I wondered what he'd been through in a year to change so much. That's when Noah appeared. I looked up, and accidentally fell into his intense gaze. Do you like it? I'll give it to you if you do. I thought he was joking, until the exhibition organizers handed me the painting. 7 After that day, Noah started appearing in my life more and more. Even someone as oblivious as me could tell what he was feeling. I'd reminded him countless times that I was married, but he ignored my warnings, acting as if he hadn't heard them. Finally, during an outdoor sketching trip, I snapped. Do you know what I hate most? Scumbags like you who play homewrecker and destroy other people's marriages. Can you just leave me alone? The sight of you makes me sick. Noah had frozen in place for several seconds before walking away, his back looking dejectedly lonely. My words worked, for exactly 2 days. Noah was bold and outgoing, the exact opposite of me, but we were similar in one way. Once we set our minds to something, we never gave up. He annoyed me with his stubbornness sometimes, but there were moments I was grateful he was there, appearing like a guardian angel whenever I needed him. 8 By the time Noah and I left the amusement park, it was already dark. My phone buzzed, Ethan was calling again. I turned it off. Aren't you worried about ignoring him? Noah raised an eyebrow, his voice teasing. I smiled. Where to next? He pulled out a pink helmet, grinning as he helped me put it on. Leaning down, he tapped the helmet gently, his eyes glinting meaningfully over my shoulder. Somewhere he'll never find us. The motorcycle roared to life, tires screeching against the pavement. I instinctively wrapped my arms around Noah's waist. He drove me through empty streets and quiet lanes, the wind rushing past our ears, the city's lights twinkling around us. Soon, colorful fireworks exploded in the night sky. Noah shouted into the wind, Happy New Year! May Layla Bennett be safe, happy, and brave enough to move forward. I smiled, joining him in shouting my heart out. 9 We got back to the villa late at night. The living room was dark, heavy with the smell of cigarette smoke. Ethan sat on the sofa, looking exhausted. When he saw me, he jumped up, forcing a smile. Layla, I couldn't reach you. Did you go to Mom's for the holiday? I hummed in response, letting him think what he wanted. As I turned to go upstairs, Ethan's hoarse voice stopped me. Layla, I had a dream last night. You fell in love with someone else and left me. He paused, then asked, Layla, will you love me forever? When I didn't answer, he sat up, staring at me anxiously, as if searching my eyes for a sign. I suddenly found it absurd. Life truly was a cycle. Once, I'd asked myself the same question 1,000 times. Did Ethan still love me? I'd thought he did. He'd filled the garden with my favorite flowers, bought me the entire Lakeview estate for my birthday, established an art foundation in my name. One year, when I was seriously ill, he'd knelt and prayed all the way up the mountain in a blizzard, step by step, to get me a Lucky Charm. He must have loved me, right? But his love was shared among many. He could love me while being intimate with other women. I knew Ethan played around, a lot. In his circle, tea, threesomes and orgies were common. The wives I drank tea with had told me not to take love too seriously. But I couldn't help it, I was greedy for his love. So I'd searched for little signs, trying to prove he loved me more than the others. Until Noah told me, real love doesn't need to be proven. 10 Thanks to the New Year holiday, Ethan had been staying home more lately. When I came back from the studio, I was shocked to find him wearing an apron, cooking in the kitchen. Why the sudden interest in cooking? I leaned against the doorframe, surprised. Layla, I've been thinking about our past. Ethan looked up, his gaze warm and doting. Those years we struggled together, nothing can replace that. I felt a wave of nostalgia. The past, such a distant memory. At 21, Ethan had said, I'll only cook for my wife, and I'll only love her. At 22, he'd said, giving birth is too painful, Layla. Let's never have kids, okay? At 23, he'd said, Layla Bennett can live without Ethan Carter, but Ethan Carter can't live without Layla Bennett. Back then, we were young and ambitious, our eyes only for each other. We'd thought true love could conquer everything. But later, we realized how naive we'd been. True love might be invincible, but it's also fragile and fleeting. 11 As I thought about it, I suddenly felt tired of it all. What are you thinking about? Ethan came out of the shower, hugging me from behind. His warm breath tickled my neck. He kissed my ear gently, his hand sliding under my pajama top. Layla, let's have a baby. That's it. I'd had enough. Ethan wasn't the same person he used to be, and neither was I. I grabbed his hand, stopping him. Turning around, I looked at him calmly. Ethan, I'm afraid of getting AIDS. Ethan's face turned deathly pale. He stared at me, frozen. You followed us that night on New Year's Eve, didn't you? I'd noticed his car trailing us after we left the amusement park. He'd thought that by pretending nothing happened, our relationship would go back to normal. But beneath the calm surface, our marriage had already fallen apart. Layla. Ethan's voice trembled. I sighed. We'd known each other for 20 years, been married for 3. Our fate had finally run its course. Do you remember the fire at the villa? I asked. Yes, you forgot to turn off the stove. But I set that fire on purpose. Ethan's eyes widened in shock. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of peace. I wanted to burn all our memories, I continued. When the fire started, smoke filling the room, I'd had a terrible thought. I'd wanted to walk into the flames and end it all. If Noah hadn't called me at that exact moment, I would have died. Why? Ethan grabbed my hands, his voice breaking. You ask why, Ethan? Don't you really know? I looked into his eyes. Ethan stumbled backward, all color draining from his face. I went to the bedroom, pulled a box from under the bed, and emptied its contents onto the floor. Every time you cheated on me, I wrote a letter. That's 56 letters total. I opened a drawer, pouring out a bottle of pills. These aren't vitamins, I've been taking antidepressants every day. As Ethan stared at me in disbelief, I unbuttoned my shirt, revealing a scar on my stomach. I lied and said I got this scar from a trip. But that's not true. Tears streamed down my face as I looked away. Ethan, we had a child once. But I got into a car accident, and we lost her. This scar was the only proof she'd ever existed. Layla, why didn't you tell me any of this? Ethan's eyes were red with tears. He reached out to touch the scar, his voice filled with agony. I called you, Ethan. But you were too busy playing dress up with another woman in bed. That day, I'd been bleeding heavily after the accident. My first thought wasn't to call 911, it was to call you. The phone rang for a long time before someone answered. I'd cried out your name over and over, but all I heard was a woman's voice. I'd listened to her say she didn't want to dress up as a nurse next time. I'd heard you say okay lazily, followed by the sound of a plastic wrapper tearing. I'd clutched the phone tightly, my heart feeling like it was being crushed by 1,000 knives. I'd felt as if I'd been thrown into an ice cellar, cold and numb. As my consciousness faded, I'd seen Noah pushing through the crowd, rushing toward me. His lips were moving, but I couldn't hear what he was saying. I'd grabbed his hand, repeating over and over, it hurts so much. It had hurt, physically and emotionally. More pain than I could bear. Ethan, I'm telling you this not to make you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because there's no going back for us. Ethan sat on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. His shoulders shook with sobs. Layla, I broke my promise. It's all my fault. Why did God punish you instead of me? His voice was choked with tears. How did we end up here? He cried like a child, broken, desperate. I'd asked myself the same question a million times. We'd loved each other so much once. But today, I finally understood. I'd given this relationship my all. So the one who should feel regret, who should be unwilling to let go, that wasn't me. Ethan, let's get a divorce. I wiped my tears, my voice steady. I want to move forward too. I looked out the window, taking a deep breath. 12 A cold front hit Riverside City. This winter felt colder than any other. Noah wrapped his scarf around my neck. I tried to take it off, it didn't match my outfit. He gritted his teeth, pretending to be angry. Ms. Bennett, if you don't listen to good advice, you'll regret it later. But he still took my hands, tucking them into his coat pocket to warm them. That's when Linda appeared, my birth mother. She looked at Noah and me with a complicated expression, her brows furrowed so tightly they could have crushed a fly. We sat across from each other in a cafe, Noah waiting OU side for me. What do you want? I asked, my voice flat. Layla, are you really going to divorce Ethan? Yes. Marriage isn't a game. Men like Ethan, they all cheat. You need to be more generous, learn to forgive him. Linda looked at me, pretending to be wise. When I didn't respond, she grew annoyed. That boy outside is much younger than you, isn't he? Layla, you're almost 30, you're not getting any younger. Can you really trust him to love you forever? I couldn't stand her sarcasm. I cut her off sharply. Did Ethan send you to talk me out of it? Linda's expression didn't change. I laughed bitterly. I guess not. Let me guess, Uncle Mark needs a favor from Ethan? Uncle Mark was my mother's second husband. A flash of embarrassment crossed Linda's face, but she quickly recovered. Layla, I'm doing this for your own good. Spare me for my own good. I'll ask you one thing, I said, leaning forward. If Chloe's husband cheats on her someday, will you tell her to forgive him too? Chloe was Uncle Mark's daughter, my half-sister. Linda avoided my gaze, unable to answer. I stood up. Linda, our mother-daughter relationship was never strong. Let's end it here. And tell Uncle Mark, I'll make sure Ethan lets his little company go bankrupt. We were married once, I'm sure he'll grant me this one request. Linda's face turned red with anger. She stood up, her voice shrill. Layla Bennett, we're family. I scoffed. We're not even on the same family register. How can we be family? 13 divorce wasn't as easy as I'd thought. My lawyer called again, saying Ethan's team was dragging their feet, refusing to agree to any draft of the divorce papers. The last time I'd seen Ethan was 2 weeks ago, at the villa gate. He'd looked terrible, unshaven, his eyes empty and lifeless. Watching the movers load my luggage into the truck, he'd asked hoarsely, "Do you really have to go? I can move out instead." "No need," I shook my head. Before I left, he let out to me, saying he'd handled the woman who'd called me that day. I suddenly remembered that call, the background noise, the sound of glass breaking. The woman had screamed, sobbing, and apologizing to me. If she hadn't called my name, I would have thought it was a prank and called the police. I knew Ethan's methods. That woman's fate wouldn't be a good one. 14 After thinking about it, I decided to call Ethan. We need to talk. This dragging on isn't helping anyone. That day, Ethan drove me around the city, from the south to the north, talking non-stop. Layla, do you remember this place? We bought our first parrot here. He pointed to a pet shop on the left. Layla, the parking lot at State Street Mall is still as crowded as ever. I wonder if the night market in North District is still open. Has your favorite stinky tofu stand moved? He smiled, a hint of nostalgia in his eyes. You always loved stinky food back then. I stared out the window, silent. Ethan didn't know. I'd visited all these places alone after we got married. The stinky tofu, the durian, I'd stopped eating all of it once I became Mrs. Carter. Layla, our old wonton shop is still open. The car suddenly stopped in front of a small restaurant. Ethan's voice was filled with excitement. This shop had been near our old rental apartment. Back then, we'd eaten there often when we were in a hurry for work. On hot summer mornings, I'd feel sleepy and overheated. Ethan would fold flyers into a small fan, fanning me first, then the wontons, waiting until they cooled down before waking me up. So much time had passed. Can we go in and eat? Ethan turned to me, his eyes pleading. I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. The landlady still remembered us. She set 2 bowls of steaming wontons in front of us, smiling at Ethan. Young man, you're finally back. I haven't seen you in ages. Your girlfriend has been coming here alone a lot lately. Ethan's smile froze. He looked at me in shock. I okayed down at my bowl, explaining calmly, Auntie, we broke up a long time ago. The landlady looked embarrassed and walked away. Ethan's voice was quiet, almost a whisper. Layla, you've been coming here alone? Yes. After a long silence, he bowed his head. His knuckles turned white as he gripped his spoon. I'm such a monster. The steam from the wontons blurred his face. Finish the divorce papers soon. I don't want our next meeting to be in court. As I spoke, I saw his eyelashes tremble. A tear fell into his soup. I know, he said, his voice thick with emotion. Epilogue. Ethan won. The news of Ethan and Lila's divorce shocked everyone in their circle. Once, their love had been the envy of all, now, it was just a tragic joke. Ethan agreed to a clean break, keeping only the villa he'd shared with Layla. The villa was empty, cold, and quiet. Ethan remembered when they'd first moved in, Layla had insisted on going to the mall to buy furniture with him. Why make it so complicated? We could just call someone to handle it, Ethan had complained. Layla had smiled brightly. You don't get it, this is what makes a home. He'd watched her haggling with the store manager, her little mouth chattering away. He'd thought she was the cutest thing in the world. Sitting on the sofa, Ethan smiled to himself. Layla. He called her name instinctively. But the only response was the ticking of the clock on the wall. He jumped up, knocking his knee against the coffee table. Stumbling to the 2nd floor, he threw open the bedroom door, only to find it empty. The 30-something man slid down the wall, tears streaming down his face. He'd wanted to find something, anything, to remember her by. But Layla had taken everything. Everything except those 56 letters. Every time he read them, the words cut him like a knife. But who could he blame? It was all his fault. He'd been the one to betray Layla, to betray their marriage, to betray their love. He was reaping what he'd sown. And too, when Ethan heard Layla was engaged, he had a ridiculous thought. If Layla would take him back, he'd be willing to be her second choice. He laughed at himself. How naive. Layla probably couldn't even stand the sight of him. Before Layla's engagement, Ethan went to see Noah. He felt he owed it to himself to check if the man who'd be spending the rest of his life with Layla was worthy of her. Ethan waited for hours before finally spotting Noah outside his apartment building. "We need to talk." Noah nodded, agreeing to meet at a nearby cafe. Before Ethan could say anything, Noah spoke first. "If you're here to tell me to leave Layla alone, save your breath." Noah had endured years of being called a homewrecker, of being yelled at by Layla. He'd waited so long for her to get divorced, he wasn't going to give up now, not even for Ethan. "If you're worried about Layla being hurt, don't be. I'm not an idiot, and my parents adore her." Ethan had already researched Noah's background. The Harrisons had business overseas. Noah's older brother had died in an accident, and Noah had taken over the family business, managing it successfully. He'd returned to the country a few years ago to expand into the local market. With Noah having said all that, Ethan had nothing left to add. As they left, Noah's phone rang. The cold look in his eyes instantly melted into warmth. Ethan knew who it was. "Layla wants me to buy groceries, she's craving my sweet and sour pork ribs," Noah said, adjusting his collar, revealing a diamond ring on his finger. "Mr. Carter, would you like to come over for dinner? I'm a pretty good cook." Sweet and sour pork ribs. Ethan's face turned pale. He'd cooked that dish for Layla countless times when they were together. After making it so many times, he'd teased her, "Aren't you tired of it?" Layla had wrapped her arms around his neck, laughing. "I could eat your cooking forever, Ethan." "No, thank you. Just take good care of her." Ethan thought, being invited to dinner was nothing short of torture. On Layla's wedding day, Ethan dissolved his company. He locked himself in the villa, sitting on the floor for hours. He guessed the wedding was probably ending by now. What was Layla doing? Toasting guests? Passing out wedding favors? Ethan smiled bitterly. He finally understood how Layla had felt that day, when she'd caught him with another woman. The day they'd left the courthouse, watching Layla walk away, Ethan had known they'd never cross paths again. But he'd refused to admit it. Sometimes, Ethan would drive past Layla's new home, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. Once, he'd been lucky. He'd seen Layla's shoelace come undone. Noah had knelt down, gently tying it into a bow. He'd seen them leaving the grocery store, Layla holding a stick of rock candy, Noah wiping a smudge off her chin. Ethan felt a wave of dizziness. Those intimate moments, they should have been his and Layla's. How had he let her slip away? His heart felt like it was being crushed, like an invisible hand was squeezing it tightly, its sharp nails piercing his chest. Ethan could barely breathe. He hated himself so much he wanted to die. People who betray true love deserve to suffer 1,000 cuts. As Ethan stood up, he remembered that old saying. He went to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and slit his wrist. Blood gushed out, dripping onto the wooden floor. Once, a fortune teller had told Ethan he'd be lonely for the rest of his life. He'd thought it was nonsense. Now, he realized it was true. Ethan sat on the balcony, opening the window. The spring wind brushed against his face, soft and gentle, like Layla's kiss. He looked at the green shoots sprouting outside, his vision growing blurry. He hoped that in his next life, Ethan Carter would be worthy of Layla Bennett. Epilogue. Noah 1. Layla was furious again, having just thrown a bowl to the floor. "Noah Harrison, how dare you show up here again? Don't you know what shame means? Do your parents know their son's a homewrecker?" Noah rubbed his nose awkwardly, his heart racing. Homewreckers were people who destroyed other people's relationships. But what relationship had he destroyed? Was there even any love left between Layla and Ethan? Noah had once hit rock bottom, coming close to ending his own life. Years ago, Noah and his brother had been in a car accident. His brother had sacrificed himself to save Noah, dying instantly. Noah had survived, but he'd been bedridden for months. Consumed by guilt over his brother's death, he'd locked himself in his studio, giving up on life. He'd tried to commit suicide several times. Finally, his mother couldn't stand it anymore. She'd slapped him, yelling, "What will it take for you to move on?" He'd pointed to a painting randomly, saying, "If someone buys that for $30 million, it means I'm meant to live." $30 million, he'd thought no one in their right mind would pay that much for an unknown artist's work. But fate had other plans. That painting had been bought by Layla. Noah had pretended to be a gallery worker when delivering it, asking her why she'd bought it. Her answer had stirred something in him, feelings of kinship, and something more. When he'd found out she was married, and that she and her husband seemed happy, he'd been happy for her, yet also sad, regretful. He couldn't explain why. One day, while overseas, Noah had seen Ethan, with his arm around a famous model, not his wife. Noah had felt sorry for Layla. But after that, he'd realized, this was his chance. He'd booked a flight back to the country immediately. Winning Layla's heart hadn't been easy. She'd called him a homewrecker, a stubborn leech, saying all kinds of cruel things to him. But Noah was optimistic, and thick-skinned. He'd waited years for her. And now that she was finally his, he wasn't going to let anything stand in his way. Thank you for listening to today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share it with your friends. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more wonderful stories. See you next time.